Welcome, everyone. Thank you so much
Hello.
for joining us.
Good morning. Good time zones, everybody.
Absolutely. Welcome to the 17th episode of the A-Spec podcast. We
Yay.
are going to be, we're starting a brand new kind of series for the next number of episodes called the Pride Talks, where we're going to be talking about Ace and Arrow Pride. Obviously, perfect time of year for it, and there's lots
It
and lots and
is.
lots to talk about in regards to that. So my name is Tai Iwai. I am a PhD student, as I alluded to, suffering through paper 3 of the doctorate around Arctic climate science. But when I'm not doing that, I work part-time as a peer co-facilitator of a Ace and Arrow support group here locally. And I
Cool.
absolutely love doing Ace and Arrow advocacy work, including chatting on the podcast here. And so the ASPEC podcast looks at asexuality and aromanticism through a lens of intersectionality. And I really want to highlight the fact that the Ace and Arrow umbrellas are so diverse. There's so many different experiences that fall under asexuality and aromanticism, and really work hard to dispel many of the misunderstandings and myths around what asexuality and aromanticism are. And I'm so incredibly excited to have Glasses Journal with us today. Would you like to introduce
Hello.
yourself?
Sure, I'd love to. Hi, I'm Glasses Journal, aka Glasses for short. I'm pretty much a warm and welcoming content creator, your little ray of sunshine that you could call me. I'm a part-time variety streamer. I primarily focus on like farming sims, indie games, retro games, and challenge runs. And then full-time, I'm a community manager and for a Twitch partner, Ray Narvaez Jr. So that's what I do for my full time job. And I have been identifying as under the asexual umbrella for over 10 years. And I'm very excited to be here.
So glad to have you join us. Lots to chat about with regards to Ace and Arrow Pride.
Mm-hmm.
There's just so much to talk about, and
There
you
is.
already you already kind of alluded to it.
Yes.
However, I wanted to kind of dig into it a little bit and talk about the
Mm-hmm.
fact that often aspec identities and asexuality can be difficult to pinpoint for many
Mm-hmm.
folks, owing to the fact that you don't know that you have a lack of attraction without some sort of context as to what that means.
Exactly. Yeah.
So, how easy was it for you to come to realize your own
Um,
asexuality?
I think for me, it was a little bit challenging at first. I remember in high school, in particularly, I was kind of identifying as like bisexual because I found an attraction to not only men, but also women as well. So I learned about bisexuality and I was like, okay, that sounds like pretty solid. I think I'll identify that as now. And then slowly moving on to like university and stuff, I finally got myself in my relationship with my partner, who I've been with for 11 years as well. And I think that's when around the time that I was like, "Ooh, yeah, maybe I'm not actually like bisexual. Maybe I find myself under like a different sort of umbrella." And I learned about asexuality and yeah, it's kind of been like that from there. I've just been mostly identifying as asexual and been very proud and vocal about it as well.
Oh yeah, we love to hear that. And
Thank you.
you sort of alluded to, I think it's not uncommon for many folks that who are ace to, initially identify as bi or sometimes
Mhm.
pan
Mhm.
without that, additional context of what sexual attraction actually is in the lens of an allosexual person.
Yep.
And the fact that, just the very limited coverage for many, many years of, asexuality in the media, on the internet,
Mhm.
prior to 2012, it was very,
Yep.
there was very little information, very
It
little
really was.
very few spaces for ace and arrow folks for sure. Absolutely. And
Mhm.
unfortunately it still is the case that, the number of spaces that really focus around asexuality and aromanticism are still few and far between in many
Mhm.
places. I am so incredibly lucky to be a part of several within the greater area around here, and I
Mhm.
recognize how lucky I am for that. But there's so many places where those places just don't exist, unfortunately.
It's so true.
Oh, I want to read what Soph
Of
mentioned here.
course.
Yeah, me and my girlfriend were legit talking about this Wednesday night, and how she explained it was that you feel no attraction at all to someone. And yes, I mean, that's very much what, the definition of asexuality is. It's little to
Mhm.
no sexual attraction. However,
Mhm.
what identifying what sexual attraction is, if you don't have some sort of context of what society means by that, can be very difficult to figure out at first, for sure. And I think many folks who fall under the ace umbrella, uh mis I guess, have mistaken, or yeah, mistakenly assumed aesthetic attraction to be sexual
Yeah.
attraction. So many people that I've talked
For
to
sure.
have talked about that. It is so common. And you can appreciate that somebody is aesthetically beautiful is not the same as
Mhm.
sexual attraction, but for many ace folks, that is how they first may have understood what society meant by sexual attraction, and then later realize, oh, not exactly.
Yeah, exactly. I feel like I personally, since like I'm a community manager and stuff, I'm very much in like the Twitch chat and everything like that for my boss. So you'll see me like interacting in Twitch chat a lot. And like if there's a very attractive character that comes on screen, or hey, like a really attractive monster, I'm just be completely honest with myself. Um I will very much be like vocal about it. You'll see me like, I don't know, like barking in chat, for example, just like expressing that I like feel attracted towards this character. And some people will be like, well, glasses, aren't you ace? And it's like, I am, but I can still feel this like attraction towards a
Hmm.
character that doesn't definitely diminish my asexuality. It doesn't mean
Absolutely
I
not.
don't have this. It just means that I'm like, I don't want to go out of my way to maybe like, procreate with that
Hmm.
character or anything like that. But doesn't mean I can't have an attraction towards them.
Absolutely, and you can't appreciate the beauty and aesthetics of that character. Absolutely.
Mhm.
So when you were coming to kind of realize your own asexuality, what sort of
Mhm.
communities or resources, were helpful for you?
Um I kind of just googled asexuality one day and kind of found just more information about it on like some websites and stuff. I do not remember what the websites were or anything like that, but know that when I was like reading up about it and everything, I was like, "Oh, this kind of sounds like me. Like this sounds like stuff that I've experienced." Cuz like in high school, for example, I didn't really feel like an attraction towards like anybody. So like I didn't really have crushes, but I noticed reflecting like nowadays, I had crushes, but I only had crushes on like people who I like really knew. So like my best friends, for example. I didn't have like, like a crush on like a random guy or random girl who I like passed by or anything. It was I had crushes on people who were like very well acquainted in my life, who were my best friends. And that's when I learned about asexuality and specifically demisexuality as well too, which is what I do identify as, but sometimes just saying asexual is just a lot easier for some people.
Absolutely. And when you were mentioning, that really the closeness that you required in order
Mhm.
to feel a crush, immediately I was like, you are explaining demisexuality right there.
Yep,
And
exactly.
unfortunately, so many people dismiss and have a great misunderstanding of what demisexuality actually is, and
They
it's so
they really
unfortunate.
do. They really do. Sometimes, like I said, it's just easier to just say asexual because I feel like nowadays people have a better understanding of it than getting into the whole aspects of demisexuality. But if people do want to listen and ask, then I explain the whole thing about demisexuality towards them.
Absolutely. The Peaceful Elliot mentioned, I was going to say that it sounded exactly like Demi. I realizing how
Mhm.
fortunate uh, I was to, or I am, to have the friends I did in high school. For
Mhm.
me, there was absolutely zero ace or arrow representation where I grew up. Not even because I
Mhm.
grew up in like a conservative environment. It just happened to be the school I was at. There was no.
Yeah.
Also, I am, approaching the 40 mark. So also at the
Mhm.
time, the number of folks that were comfortable being out were nowhere near the same as what we are today. So just the number
Exactly.
of people out and the having any sort of frame of reference as to what asexuality and or aromanticism
Mhm.
were just wasn't there. So I
Yeah,
had no
that's
idea.
basically why. Yeah, that's basically why for like the longest time, like I identified as asexual, but I didn't really tell people about it. I mostly was just like, "Oh yeah, like I'm bisexual," kind of a thing. So then people wouldn't like ask further questions about asexuality
Yeah.
and everything cuz I feel like a lot of people like just didn't understand it or it was very quick to just being like, "Oh, so like you don't have sex?" And it's like, "No." Um, there's a lot more to that. Hello?
Yeah, yeah,
They
yeah,
kinda just jumped the gun immediately. So that's why
yeah.
for, like, I wanna say, like, 5 years, only, like, a lot of close friends knew that I was asexual, and everybody else knew I was bisexual.
That is such a common experience,
It
unfortunately.
really is.
People equate the lack of sexual attraction as meaning not wanting sex, and that's not the
Exactly.
case for
No.
all aces. Absolutely
No.
not.
'Cause I very much hate to tell people, because I explain this to people, like, all the time as well too, it's that even asexual people have sex drives, like, a lot every human being has a sex drive, it's just how people go out of their way to deal with the sex drive, and a lot of people do it differently, even asexual people, at the end of the day.
Mm-hmm. Exactly. And the key is that libido
Mhm.
directly associated with a particular person or not. That's sort of how I
Mhm.
see it.
Exactly.
That's the difference between libido and sexual attraction. And that is
Yep.
something that is greatly misunderstood, unfortunately.
Mhm.
So we've definitely alluded to the fact that, you know, asexuality was, very elusive or invisible to
Mhm.
us for many years. And, it has been, called the invisible orientation for so many reasons. And this
It
was a
really has.
phrase coined by Julia Sondra Decker in 2014,
Mhm.
um, because of the fact that erasure of aspec identities is just so common, unfortunately,
Yep.
and it is so hard, as I like to say, to find an ace person in the wild. There's no contextual clues as to the fact that somebody might be ace unless they tell you, "Hey, I'm ace."
Pretty much. Yep.
Are you able
You
to
have
kind
to
of
be
comment on this at all?
I think for myself, some like erasure that I've like experienced, for example, is I remember in my chat once we were having a conversation about asexuality because me and another friend were asexual, and somebody in chat was very much vocal in saying that, oh, the A in LGBTQA plus stands for asexuality and allies. And we're like, no, allies are not a part of that.
No,
Not a
absolutely
part of that.
not.
We are not clumped together with allies. Allies are
No,
not a part of this beautiful alphabet. I'm so sorry to tell you that is for asexuality,
and
aromanticism,
aromanticism
e
and agender.
exactly, and agender. That
Mhm.
allies are not in this list, and they had, like, a massive argument with us, and it's just like, "You know what? We need to step back from this conversation, and you definitely need to kinda learn," because I think a lot of people do think that the A and LGBTQA+ also includes allies, but it's like, no, because why do you have to be included in this? Because you guys are represented in your own right. You don't need to be a part of this.
No, absolutely not. There's so many there's a meme that I came across last year that
Mhm.
absolutely killed me. And it was the are you familiar with the term AAA battery? The ace
Oh,
arrow
yes.
agender
Yeah.
person. So it was a
Yep.
AAA battery coming at the person saying, A is for ally, and I just about fell on the floor laughing so
Ugh.
hard. I'll have
Yep.
to try to dig that one up because I was like, it was hilarious.
Speaking of memes, do you remember? Because I'm sure you've mentioned your age as well too, you're in your 40s,
Not
and
quite, 38.
oh, well, I'm in my 30s as well too.
Yeah,
So, um, do you remember the asexual meme that would always go around "Oh, we love cake" and stuff like that? Do you remember that
absolutely.
one?
We talked about
Oh
that in the
my
very
gosh.
first episode, the how
That's perfect.
the cake meme came about.
Oh my gosh. The cake meme is so funny to think about. It's just that asexual people, they don't want to deal with like sex or anything like that. We just want to slice a cake and
Hmm.
everything. And it's like, what? It's
So
so funny to think about.
yeah, the way that initially came about, I believe, is that
Hmm.
AVEN, so the Asexual Visibility and Education Network,
Yep.
used cake as a metaphorical welcoming to folks joining AVEN.
Yep.
And then that kind of became
Hmm.
adopted as the ace meme, so to speak, which
Hmm.
became, cake is better than sex, and then eventually garlic bread is better than sex, and then eventually X
Yep.
is better than sex.
Yep. And it goes on from there.
Very much so.
Yep.
And unfortunately, another way is we kind of, kind of transitioning. You talked about memes, and this is a good way to kind of pivot. Media
Hmm.
representation of asexuality is abysmal for the most part.
Oh my gosh. Yes.
So
it's so bad.
it's almost always limited to sex repulsed
Yep.
aces, the
Yep.
quote gold star aces, and unfortunately that means that many people see every ace as being sex repulsed, never had
Hmm.
sex, like doesn't want
Hmm.
anything to do with sex, and that is not the
Hmm.
case for so
No.
many aces.
It is not the case for so many aces. And even like just thinking of like an asexual person like on top of my head, I probably can't really name one because of how much like good representation. There's really not that much of like asexual characters that are good representation.
Hmm. Exactly.
It's just like, oh, this person just like, like you mentioned, is just like sex repulse, so they must be asexual. Or they're devoid of emotion or anything like that. They're depicted
Yeah,
as antisocial, and it's just like, I feel like we're a lot more than that. Like,
absolutely.
why does it have to diminish it to that?
It's so unfortunate, and the
It really is.
in many cases the characters are very one dimensional. The only thing
Mhm.
about them is that they're ace, and that's the only thing that
Yep.
they ever depict. Why can't an
Yep.
ace person just happen to be ace and do something else? Like, that's what real people are.
Exactly.
Asexuality is one part of my identity, but it's not my entire life by any stretch.
Exactly. It's like writing a gay character and that's their only personality is that they are gay.
The tokenization.
And it's like, what?
Mm-hmm. It's the unfortunate tokenization written
Hmm.
by somebody that doesn't have that lived experience in
No.
many cases.
There have been, I think, like, a few instances where I have seen asexuality written well, but that's been in,
Mm-hmm.
like, very, like, small media, like
Mm-hmm.
in web comics and stuff.
Mm-hmm.
People will mention that this character is asexual, and it'll actually show them, like, growing and thriving and everything, but it's not in, like, popular media.
No,
And if it is,
absolutely not.
it's, like, either not talked about, it's, like, fandom picked,
Mm.
because it's just like people, asexuals especially, will see a character that, like, isn't paired with anybody or anything like that, and they'll kind of adopt that character as being asexual when it hasn't been, like, confirmed or anything,
No,
or it'll
exactly.
just have a very poorly written ace character. Or
Absolutely.
even in some cases, they'll just be like, "Oh, this character was ace the whole time," and it's like, were
After
they,
the
or did you
fact.
just add that for fun?
Yeah, after the fact, exactly.
Mhm.
Do want to catch up on a couple of points in the chat
Of
here.
course, feel free.
Um, let's see. I think I have no idea how to pronounce your name. I'm so sorry. Is it Maida T?
Yeah, it's made a tea.
Yeah. All right. I somehow managed it correctly. I'm surprised.
Proud of you.
They said I never thought about. Oh man, the pinned is right. Oh, there we go. I never thought about dating after someone said something to me along the lines of marry and accept you're a failure who won't make it alone in
Mhm.
elementary school. What the fuck? I am so sorry. What the hell is somebody telling you that in elementary school, let alone at
Yeah,
all? What in the
a lot of
absolute
people have
fuck?
that idea that you have to get married and have kids in order to be successful in life, and
Yeah,
it's like, that's such a disgusting idea to think of.
exactly. It is so disgusting, so frustrating, so unfortunate that there's this
Mhm.
predestined escalator that we have to follow, from friends to a little bit more to life partner. And
Mhm.
that's not the case. And why should it be?
No.
It's just what societal norms assume. And
Yep, it
it is
really is.
so problematic. Not only for aces and arrows, but for a whole host of other folks. There are folks
Yep.
that happen to not be in relationships or are in, you know, poly relationships that don't follow that path. And there's nothing wrong with
Yeah.
that.
Yeah. Everybody's having a lot of good comments and references in the
Absolutely.
chat. Good job, everybody. We love the conversations.
Exactly. That's what this podcast is here for, to
Mhm.
elicit discussion, elicit and talk about the myriad of experiences that fall under asexuality and aromanticism and the
Mhm.
unfortunate misconceptions that happen as a result. I completely agree. Normie media doesn't care to handle non-trope characters well.
They really
Unfortunately.
don't.
Yeah, that's so right.
And it's just like we're a lot more than just a trope
Mm-hmm.
of being
Exactly.
like sex repulse or anything like that. Because like I mentioned beforehand, some aces aren't even sex repulsed as well too, because the asexuality umbrella is so big and so broad.
Absolutely. Just realized I forgot to finish what Maida T mentioned.
But you're
Uh,
totally fine, don't worry.
it took me until, I was, 30 to kind of come to that realization myself. I kind of myself fall under the gray ace umbrella.
Mhm.
Um, and, I actually figured out I was aromantic after attempting to be in, a what you would consider a traditional relationship and realizing that is not at all what I want. I just felt like I was following
Forced into do it.
what society told me I was supposed to be doing.
Exactly.
And then wham, you know, pandemic, my early 30s arrived. I'm like, what the hell am I doing? I have been
Mhm.
so much happier coming to that realization and giving myself permission to not have to attempt to force myself into a box that I don't fit in.
I love that for you. I love this journey that you've gone on.
Absolutely.
Because, like you said, you're feeling so much happier with yourself. And that's what the whole thing about finding your sexuality and like your romantic attraction is. It's about finding yourself, finding that comfort, and just being happy with yourself.
Absolutely. That's all it's about. And
Hmm.
finding folks that can relate to aspects of your experience and that can appreciate you for who you are.
Hmm.
And Maida also mentions it's tough, the elevator, the escalator. Absolutely. Um, and, it, as you mentioned, it doesn't, it, how it exists in society does vary from culture to culture, but
Hmm.
there's definitely this assumption pretty much no matter where you go that eventually you're going to find a person, you're going to settle down, and 99 times out of 100 it's assumed that it's a heterosexual relationship and that
Hmm.
you're going to have kids. And then if you don't, then you're somehow broken, and it's so disgusting.
Pretty much. Or you continuously get like asked, like, oh, when are you guys having kids? And it's like, I don't think that's like any of your business when I decide if I want
Exactly.
to have kids or not. I think that's just between me and my partner. And when it happens, it happens. And if it doesn't, I feel like you
Yeah,
definitely need to respect that
exactly.
and
It's
not
none of your
keep like
business.
like harassing us for it to happen.
Yeah, exactly. And yeah, absolutely. Um, even amongst the wider 2S LGBTQIA plus community, there's a lot of misconceptions around what asexuality and aromanticism are. It
Mhm.
has unfortunately meant that I've known quite a few ace and arrow folks that aren't always comfortable entering, queer spaces because of those misconceptions,
Oh,
or
for sure.
the fact that, aphobia can exist and often does in those places, and it's
It
really
really
sad.
does. Every June I feel the aphobia comes out again
Yeah,
because I don't know why they just like don't want to welcome us into the spaces. Like I feel a lot of people think the assumption of this like if somebody who is ace comes into their space, they're part of like a heterosexual relationship or anything like that, or they're just like faking it for attention or anything. And it's like, no, I'm very much happy and comfortable just like with my sexuality, and I believe I deserve to have a place in these spaces as well. Just because I'm not dating somebody who's the same sex as me or anything like that does not mean anything of the sort. I still belong in these places, whether you like it or not.
exactly. And I think another reason why so many ace and arrow folks are uncomfortable entering queer spaces is those spaces are so heavily focused around sex and
Mhm.
romance.
That too.
And coming in as somebody that doesn't have that same relationship to sex and romance is not necessarily well understood by the broader queer community, or it obviously
Mhm.
may not feel comfortable. So it can be very difficult. I am rather lucky that our space where I work has this, Ace and Arrow um, support group for folks in the
Mhm.
community. It didn't actually begin at the space I work at now. So what happened is it started as its own independent kind of like meetup, and
Mhm.
then at the time, the person who was running it reached out to our local 2S LGBTQIA plus organization and said, hey, look, we would love to merge and create a space in the community for Ace and Arrow folks. Would you be interested
Mhm.
in absorbing our group? And they were very happy to do so and said they've been looking to do that for quite a while.
Mhm.
And so I've been rather lucky in that regard. But I know
Yeah,
that's
and
not
that's
the
awesome.
case for so many spaces.
For sure. But that's why we create these spaces and we have our communities. And that's why you do your podcast. And I'm very vocal about like my sexuality, for example, so that
Mm,
other people who, don't have that luxury of like, getting to go to these spaces like IRL and deal with it, they have at least the comfort of online spaces where they can just be themselves type of a thing.
absolutely. Absolutely. And it
Mhm.
was, those online spaces where I really came to recognize my own asexuality
Exactly.
and aromanticism. I joined a Discord called Aces in STEM, and we've had a couple of people from that Discord on the podcast
That's
chatting
awesome.
with us. And it was through that Discord that I really came to understand my own aspec
Mhm.
identities and really became more comfortable with using those labels.
For sure. Even in like Twitch spaces, for example, that's where I found a lot of people who are asexual as well, especially in my boss's community, which is very surprising. Like even before I worked as his community manager, that's where I met so many people who also identified as ace. And now it's just I feel like almost everybody in there is
Hmm.
ace in some way because I've met like 99% of the people that I've met are ace in some way. And I'm like, what is happening? How did we do this? How did this
Hmm.
straight Puerto Rican man just like invite all these ace people into this one little corner of the internet? But it's
Somehow we,
because
yeah.
it's because he's so safe and welcoming to so
Hmm.
many of us that we can feel comfortable about our sexualities and
Absolutely.
everything like that.
Exactly. Somehow we
Mhm.
just navigate towards each other even if we don't necessarily know each other are ace.
Exactly. That ace tag, the asexual tag for Twitch, it really brings out all the aces.
It does, absolutely. I do want to
It's
catch
also
up and see what everybody's
of
been talking
course.
about.
Sounds good.
Love is not marriage. Love can mean so many different things.
Love can.
I can, I carried a sign at Pride last year that said
Mhm.
not all love is romance with the arrow
True.
colors.
I love
And
that.
I got lots of cheers from the aces and arrows in the crowd with that one.
Yep. They know. We all know. Cuz it's true. Love doesn't have to be just like
Oh,
sex or anything like that. It can be platonic love, and I platonically love so many of my friends, for example.
exactly. Exactly. It can be a queer platonic as well. It can be all
Yep.
sorts of different things. It doesn't have to be
Exactly.
that societal norm as to what
Mhm.
society expects it to mean. And Flora brings up a really good point in that,
Mhm.
it's similar to white feminism in many ways, in that once once folks find it's comfortable for them, they stop caring and stop fighting to
It's so
make
true.
spaces safer for everyone.
It's also like that with like trans folks as well too. Like obviously due to recent events, trans folks for example have been like really going through it with all these different like bills and things that have been happening to just like dehumanize them. And so many people in like the LGBT community just like, oh, well, shrugs type of a thing. Like, no, you have to also support your brethren as well too.
Mm-hmm.
your brothers and sisters in the LGBTQ alphabet. If they fall, we all fall together. So we have to
Mm-hmm.
stay strong together. And
Absolutely.
that's also with the ace people as well. We have to support each other. We stay strong together as the alphabet.
Absolutely. There's all sorts of attacks trying to stick initially what looks like a wedge into part of the 2S LGBTQIA plus community, but in
Mhm.
reality, that's just an intermediate step to basically break it all apart. So, the whole
Exactly.
absolutely disgusting LGB without the T
Oh my god. Yep.
eventually means we don't want any of you, and it's disgusting.
It's so gross. And that also comes up during Pride Month as well too, and it's like, why is this coming up during Pride Month of all months, guys? This is where we
Yeah,
celebrate each other and everybody.
exactly. And obviously, it's a big, obviously quite a big elephant in the room recently. The whole certain children's author attacking the ace community now as well.
Why did she go after us? You know? I just saw that like tweet that she was just upset at us, and I'm like, what the fuck did we do to piss you off? You know?
We don't
She's
uphold
she's huffing
the,
that
yeah,
black mold for real.
really. And I think some people argue that it's a attack against folks that don't fit the whatever she thinks is the gold standard of relationships.
It really
Because,
is.
many
And so it's
folks,
just like,
yeah,
who's next, you know?
exactly. It's disgusting. The
It is.
It just shows that it's not just about one particular group. It eventually is going to be everyone. They
Mhm.
use, they attack trans folks as a wedge, as a
Yep.
distraction against all the horrible, heinous shit they're doing. And then
Mhm.
they're going to come for everybody else next.
Exactly. That's why we all have to stay strong together, and we can't just be like, "Oh yeah, we're just gonna let them deal with that," type of a thing. It's like, "No, no, you're gonna support them as well, just like they support you."
Exactly. And what so many people don't realize is that it was during Stonewall, it was
Yep.
trans folks out there
Yep.
fighting for everyone.
Yep.
And that seems to be forgotten.
It really does, and it's like, "Nah, you have to nah, you can't do that." You can't just be like, "Ah, we're just not gonna add the T in it anymore." It's like, "No, no. The tea is how we got to where we got
Mm-hmm.
today. Our trans brothers and sisters got to where we are today. We can't just be like, who cares about them type of a thing. It's like, no, no. They're the whole reason why you have rights in your country
Mm-hmm.
to begin with
Exactly.
and why you need to keep fighting for your rights.
1,000,000%.
Mhm.
I'm absolutely loving all the discussion in the chat. There's so many
Me
good
too.
points.
Shout out to all the chatters. You guys are all great. I love you all. Mwah, mwah, mwah. I'm so sorry in advance, by the way, if you hear my dog squeaking her toy, because she's found her
No
squeaky toy.
worries at all. No worries at all. And on that note, I actually came out as non-binary last year during Pride.
Oh,
Yeah, I'd
congratulations.
been, really thinking about it for a number of years and had
Mhm.
this really internalized monologue or dialogue that I can't be NB because I didn't feel like I was, you know, feminine from the time I was born, which is the
Mhm.
unfortunate story that the media tells you you have to be if you're trans, and
Yep.
that's not at all the case.
No. That's why in my chats, for example, I'm very like open to everybody. Like, if you come in one day and you're like, you know what, I want to try out these pronouns, or I want to try out, identifying as this. We are all so welcome and celebratory for that
Mhm.
because it's the whole thing. It's a whole journey. Like, you don't just, wake up one day and you're just like, "Ah, I'm just
No.
gonna be this right here."
No.
It's like, no, no. It's a whole journey. It takes its time. And hey,
Mm.
sometimes you might not identify as something that you thought you were gonna identify because I had a friend who he also thought he was part of the asexual umbrella as well. And so I was very open to having the conversation about what asexuality is, stuff like that. And then months down the road, he's like, "Hey, you know what? I don't think I'm personally asexual. I think, I'm more this, but thank you so much for being very open about this like conversation." I'm like, "Yeah, man, of course. You can change your sexuality and your romantic attraction at any point in your life, and it is okay."
And I'm sure that he's a strong ally having gone through that.
Yup,
Absolutely.
exactly.
That's what I really like to talk about is, hey, if you come to realize the ace label doesn't work for you, we've got a
Mhm.
really strong ally. And
Exactly.
we love that.
Do
Perfectly
love
okay.
that.
Have a wonderful time zone, so thank you so much for
Bye,
stopping by.
Soph. Oh, welcome. I'm so glad to hear that you've learned so many identities over the past months. It's so much
Absolutely.
fun learning about everything.
Absolutely. I've come to learn so much. Oh, yes, the fact that all non-binary folks have to conform to whatever androgyny happens to be in
Yup.
the eyes of the media at any given point in time is
It's
so
so
frustrating.
exhausting. I can only imagine. I'm a cisgender female. So obviously I personally don't have to deal with that. I have the luxury of that, but I feel bad for any of my like non-binary friends who have to fight society basically for this whole like you have to be androgynous.
Yeah,
And it's like, no,
no.
you can still be non-binary and you can, dress one way or act one way, and that is totally fine. You get to decide if
Hmm.
you're non-binary or not. Nobody else does.
No. And it's rather frustrating because obviously my presentation comes across very mask, and so there's all sorts of
Mhm.
assumptions about what my pronouns are as a result. And
Yep.
getting sirred every time at the store makes me want to scream.
Yeah. Yeah.
And
I
I
can
don't
only
want to go
imagine.
through, I obviously don't want to go through a long discussion with everybody, just trying to
Mhm.
exist and go, you know, do their customer service thing, but it does get frustrating. I get it.
It does get frustrating. And sometimes you never know. Like sometimes you'll just have like a rough day and that's like the last thing that you want to hear?
Yeah, exactly.
It's just like why can't we just like not do that and make any assumptions? you know?
Exactly. I've tried my best to not presume anybody's pronouns until they
Mhm.
tell me what their pronouns are.
Mhm.
I've worked really hard to start using they or
Same.
gender neutral um, pronouns unless I'm
Yep.
specifically told as to what that particular person's pronouns are.
Exactly. Or
They
hey, they
can be
might even
used
be
for
using
anything.
like
Yeah,
neopronouns? Yeah,
exactly.
literally they can be used for anything. And I think even people with who have like neopronouns even appreciate that a lot more too
Hmm.
than simply just assuming
Absolutely.
as well. Like obviously you're gonna try your best to use neopronouns, but I know for some people it can be difficult
Hmm.
to use neopronouns because of the whole aspect around them and everything, but still like try your best to make an attempt, if anything. So, but I do know that at the end of the day, they probably do appreciate a they. Well, some people do. I shouldn't speak
Yeah.
for the whole like
No, there are
neopronoun
some
community,
people that.
obviously, but
Yeah.
I think that's a lot better than just like assuming somebody's pronouns.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And I'm not necessarily going to know that somebody uses neopronouns unless they tell me.
hmm
So
Exactly.
I obviously absolutely try my best, and I try to use they because to me it's the
hmm
it's the most broadly I guess it can be used to, they is used just generally for anyone
Yeah, that's
in
why I try
the
and use it as
traditional
well.
English language, as
Yep.
much as the transphobes love to argue it isn't.
I love it when they argue about pronouns so much. That's my favorite thing because pronouns are not just like he, him, she, her, they, them. Pronouns are like I
Yeah,
and everything. It's
yeah.
like you use pronouns in your everyday life. I think you're just being very silly.
Hmm.
And you know that they would get upset as well if you used the wrong pronoun against them. Like it's the whole thing if you call a dog, for example, if you see somebody walking a dog and you're like, "Oh, he's such a beautiful dog." Somebody is going to correct you and be like, "Oh yeah, she's a beautiful dog."
Hmm.
And it's like, "Oh my gosh,
Hmm.
they're the type of people to do that." But God forbid I have my pronouns in my Twitter bio.
Hmm. Exactly. I know a few folks that will purposely, when they start getting transphobes in the chat,
Mhm.
purposely call them by the wrong pronouns, and they just get so angry.
They do. And it's like, well, hey, I don't know why you're upset about it. If you understand, like, you know, it's silly. It's just silly stuff.
It is. So we've talked about a lot so far,
We have. We've jumped to
and
like
yeah,
almost every one of these
everything
topics that
we
we
have.
have.
Exactly. Is there a particular one that you'd like to talk about next at this point?
Uh, let's see. We could talk about asexuality and romanticism being misunderstood
Absolutely, that's a great one.
because I've had so many of those. Like we mentioned previously, one of the biggest things of asexuality, obviously, is you can't have a romantic relationship. You can't be like attracted to a character. There's a lot of like can'ts. Like you have to fit in this certain box, basically. Like you can't do this, you can't do that, you can't have an attraction, you can't be in a relationship. You just have to be by yourself, and that's it. And it's like, well, no, that's not it at all. And I think those are definitely like some of the most frustrating experiences is just like trying to explain it to people and they just like can't comprehend that there's just people out there who like just don't go out of their way to, like have sex or just people who don't have, like any romantic desires. It just doesn't compute with them. It's like they feel like I'm a robot or something. And it's like, no, I'm not, I promise you.
And unfortunately, many early media representations of asexuality were just that, robots.
Mhm. Which that's extremely upsetting too.
And on the aspect of aromanticism as, villains, or, even ace folks as villains.
Yeah. And it's
It's,
like let's not represent ourselves as
no.
that. That's kind of wild. Like obviously representation can still be good, but it kind of needs to be a mixture. For every like villain we need to have like 3 good ace representation.
Hmm.
Like I'm personally totally fine with how people in the alphabet mafia are represented. Like not every representation is going to be good representation, but obviously a lot of people are different in their own ways. Not every gay person is going to be the epitome of this is the LGBTQ rep that we need
No.
type of thing. Like I want to see people who are like ace who make mistakes. I want to see people who are ace who get that happily ever after. I want to see so many different stories type of a thing instead of just being like, here's this one ace character and that's all you get.
Tokenization is such a huge problem all across the
It really
2S
is.
LGBTQI plus community. And
Yep.
unfortunately, those characters are often written by folks with no lived experience of that identity,
Mhm.
and it makes for really awful one-dimensional representation.
It really does. And we're so much more than one dimensional. I looked up on Wikipedia for fun on some of the different, asexual characters, and I'm like, "I don't think these are such odd and interesting characters that just sort of like, this character is asexual." I'm like, "Oh, I don't know if they really are or not, but okay."
Rhonda J. Brown actually has a whole chapter dedicated to it in their book,
Mhm.
Refusing Compulsory Sexuality, a Black asexual lens on our sex obsessed culture, and really breaks down just the problematic stereotypes and representation that media has in general around
Mhm.
asexuality. I highly recommend that book. It is not for folks that are just coming to understand asexuality. It is not a
Mhm.
101 level. This is a very much borderline academic treatise of asexuality.
Mm.
So it's not the one to jump into if you're just coming to learn what asexuality is. But if you really
Yeah.
want to engage with many of the problematic stereotypes and the problematic societal norms around asexuality, this is a fantastic book. I'll drop it in the
Mhm.
chat.
You
Um,
should. Yes, yes.
Sharonda J. Brown is the author, and
Mhm.
it's called Refusing Compulsory Sexuality. That's kind of the short title.
Mhm.
A black, and it also obviously gets into many aspects of intersectionality, which is what I'm really
Yep.
interested about in this podcast.
Mhm.
So that's the book.
Mhm.
Definitely not a 101 level. If you want more 101 level books,
Mhm.
there's Ace by Angela Chen,
Mhm.
Cody Diagle-Orians, aka Ace Dad Advice, has got a couple of books now. I think one just coming out that really are kind of like the Ace 101 level kind of stuff.
Mhm.
And this kind of moves us towards the next question, but we do have an ad
Mhm.
break coming up in about 2 minutes, and I
Sounds
don't
good.
want to delve too heavily into that.
Mhm.
So why don't we take like a short break here so I can,
Sounds good.
stretch and
Yeah, no
regather my
problem
thoughts for the
here.
next question.
Sounds great. I'll be
So we'll
here.
absolutely let's swap on over to the BRB screen,
Okie dokie.
and we'll be back in a few minutes. See you on the other side of
Yep.
the. All right, welcome back, folks. Thanks for sticking
Hello.
around. As we alluded to, we're going to jump into media representation in a little bit more detail.
Mhm.
We can talk about we can talk about movies, we can talk about books, whatever you like.
Sounds good. Sounds good. Sounds good. Some representation of asexuality in media. I think the one that like comes to mind like recently was in the Marvel comics, Gwenpool. She like recently came out as like asexual and everything, which I thought was like really nice. That was like a nice like bit of representation. Just like and it was like also representation where it's just like they actually talk about asexuality
Mm-hmm.
and not just like hey guys, I'm ace and that's it. It's like
Which,
actually
yeah,
talking and like educating people about it.
absolutely. I have not seen that particular. I've not had the opportunity to see that
Mhm.
representation, but it is. I am glad to see more and more representation coming out in
Same.
these big franchises. Finally,
Mhm.
it's uh, definitely took far too long, but I'm glad it's starting to happen eventually.
It has. Yeah, I'm glad there's more of it just so it's just I feel like it's easier for some people to just like connect to it if they have media
Hmm.
represented. Like for example, when like the Big Bang Theory came out and stuff like that, and Sheldon Cooper, who's not like the best representation of like autism, for example, but I think it's a good starting point for some people, especially if they like, like have a kid maybe, or they have a friend who might be on the spectrum. It's a good starting point to be like, oh, my friend does stuff like that. Interesting. And then you start to research and gain more knowledge on it. Like, that's why we need those type of characters as like a starting point for some people where it's like, oh, my friend is asexual. Let me now research more about this type of a thing, you know?
Unfortunately, those characters, like Sheldon Cooper, are very stereotypical,
They very much are.
and
That is the
it's
other thing as well too.
problematic. And a lot of people code,
Yep.
for many people, coded Sheldon Cooper as Ace and or Arrow, which is completely wrong, because then,
Yeah.
inevitably
That
comes
is
out and
also another bad thing as well
yeah.
too, is basically there's definitely good and bad in that entire situation. Like again, it's a like maybe a good starting point type of a thing, but also there's a whole stereotypical thing around it as well too, like you mentioned as well, for sure.
So I've usually actually pinpointed Sheldon Cooper as
Mhm.
bad representation because of the fact that it's
Interesting.
so
Oh,
stereotypical.
no. For sure. I can definitely see it as, like, both sides as well.
Yeah, absolutely.
Mhm. Yeah. And it definitely goes back to our whole thing of, what's the word I'm looking for? It goes back to our whole, like, discussion beforehand of having more representation of ourselves so that we don't just have these stereotypical type of,
Hmm.
characters or anything like that. We have characters, make mistakes. We have characters, have very nice, healthy relationships and stuff like that. That it's not one just single bit of
Yeah.
representation that we kind of go from there.
And it is difficult because, we're so starved to see the Ace and Arrow representation.
Honestly.
So I
Yep.
totally get what Unflora is saying. Absolutely.
Oh, yeah. Conflicting is probably the best way to describe this for sure.
Absolutely.
Hmm.
What I would love to see, and it's difficult to ask given, the multiple levels of marginalization, is aspec characters that aren't white, that are,
Yes.
you know, gender queer in
Yep.
mainstream media, but that's a lot of an ask, I guess. Because
It
I
is a
think,
lot of an ask.
unfortunately, the only mainstream media representation tends to be white, tends to be cisgender.
Yep. Yep.
And what about the folks who, are BIPOC and have a very
Hmm.
different experience, very different lived experience around asexuality? And I know
Exactly.
Chris Hangry, who we were chatting with in episode 11, talked about the
Hmm.
fact that they found it really difficult growing up because there was
Hmm.
absolutely no media representation that reflected their own lived experiences around
Yeah.
asexuality.
Hmm.
Absolutely, BIPOC and disabilities, exactly.
I
The
agree.
multiple levels of marginalization and oppression.
Mhm.
It's the white cisgender abled aces,
Yep,
unfortunately.
and we need more than the white cisgender able aces. Like, yes, good representation is good to have, but we also need more stories. Not
Mm,
just the single ace person, we need more of those stories for sure.
exactly. Absolutely.
Mhm.
Do you have any favorite books, either fiction or nonfiction, which have good aspec representation in your opinion?
Um, let me think. Let me think. I remember I used to read this old, like, comic. What was it called? I think it was called, like, Lumberjanes, and there was a character who was asexual, and I kinda just, like I enjoyed just reading it because I was like, "Oh, yeah, this character is asexual," but unfortunately, nothing really comes to mind, and like I said, if there was a character who was asexual, it was in small media that I don't necessarily, like, remember offhand, which is a shame, but that's why we need more of it. I think also in most recent as well. the show and the comic, like Heartstopper, for example, I think they've also touched on asexuality as well. I don't know the particular character as well, but yeah.
Answer the one question. So the reason why I
Mhm,
wear these purple tints, they're not sunglasses. It's actually Noir 81 purple tints, and it's because of screen sensitivity I
mhm.
developed following a major concussion in at the end of
Oh,
2018.
no.
And so, as a result, if I don't wear these purple tints, I get very dizzy and tired
Mhm,
and fatigued looking at screens. So this is the only thing that basically allows me to work in front of the computer for long periods of time, unfortunately. But yeah, a lot of people think they are sunglasses, but they're not. They're purple clip-ons,
mhm.
and so they just like purple clip-ons on glasses. But yeah, looking at the screen like that is really hard on my eyes, so I have to
Yeah,
wear them.
gotta take care of yourself.
Exactly. But yeah, a lot of people
Also, you
think
look
they're
cool with them, I
sunglasses.
will say. I will
Thank
say you
you.
look cool with them.
Yeah,
You're welcome, you're welcome.
they do look very much like sunglasses, though. It's but yeah, if I don't wear them, I'll get really dizzy and really fatigued very quickly. And given
Mhm,
that my PhD work is so heavily focused around uh, data data analysis, climate modeling, I spend so much time in front of the computer every day.
mhm.
Yeah, they're not very common, and they're very dark, so I understand why people think they are sunglasses. But yeah,
Yeah,
it's a Noir 81 tint.
more you know. Yeah, I'm even looking on, like, the Wikipedia page of more, like, asexual characters, and I think, like I mentioned before, what happens a lot is that characters who are asexual kinda get brought up, like, by the creators, like, in interviews after, and I'm like, that's kind of like a weird thing when you have to bring up somebody's, like, sexuality after the fact, and it's not incorporated into the media, you know? It is just kind of, like, weird to me. Like, for example, I'm obviously on just, like, the Wikipedia page, so take Wikipedia with what you can, obviously. But, like, Victor from, like, the series Arcane, it's like the co-creator revealed in an interview that he's always seen Victor as asexual, but it's not really talked about in the show, and it's like, well, how can I kinda take that representation then if it's not really seen in that piece of media?
Absolutely. And I think one of the things that a lot of mainstream media has trouble presenting to a, population that, is very much assuming that everybody is obviously cis heteronormative, allonormative,
Yep,
amatonormative. How do
yep.
you represent the nuances of asexuality, the nuances of aromanticism to somebody that doesn't understand that lived experience? And it's not
Mhm.
easy to do.
It's not easy to do.
And that's
Be
why they
Yep,
default every time to the a sex repulsed, sex negative ace, because that's all that
because
they can.
society
Yeah,
really knows and understands.
yeah. It's not easy
Exactly.
to. We've talked about it before. It's not easy. How do you create a character that is going to
Mhm,
be coded as demisexual by the majority of society
mhm.
when most people just think, oh, they're just waiting to have sex because they're a good Christian or something bullshit like that.
Yep. It's it's so difficult, and that's why we need a lot more of it because we need those different types of characters through different walks of life type of a thing. It can't just be one character that is just the big representation of all sexuality and all lived experiences. It has to be, like, so many characters to
Yeah,
kinda get to that point. And
absolutely.
exactly, Rachel Unflor in the chat, media does need to find a balance that allows
Hmm.
representation without being the only aspect of the character, for real. And I also hope
Absolutely.
that we find it. I hope more people write asexual characters because, again, we're just people at the end of
Yeah.
the day. That's it. I want more people to write asexuals who are in like relationships and stuff
Hmm.
like that because they
Yeah,
are. So many people are in
absolutely.
relationships and are asexual.
Absolutely. There's all sorts of alloromantic asexuals that I know.
Mhm.
And
There's
some
there's
of
so
the
many trans asexuals as well.
exactly.
Non-binary asexuals, like it's
Yeah,
just
exactly.
a huge thing.
Absolutely. Some of the best representation I can think of was a book I actually was a beta reader for.
Mhm.
Um, so the focus, what was great about it is the focus wasn't asexuality. The book was about
Mhm.
actually um, a researcher that
Mhm.
um, it's set in the near future in like 2040 or so, and so there's a little bit of very nuanced sci-fi aspects to it. But
Mhm.
they I guess they board a boat. It's called Be the Sea by Clara Ward, and so they
Mhm.
board a boat and they convince the captain to take them to someplace. I don't remember all the
Mhm.
details, but there was some really, for a book, really nuanced representation of different kinds of asexuality and different identities
Mhm.
under asexuality. And what was great is that wasn't the focus. It was like, oh yeah, they're ace, but that's just
Yep.
one part of them. That wasn't their
Exactly.
entire character. And that's what I like to see. But it
Exactly. That's
tends
just
to
what we
only
want to
be
see.
these independent, not well, I guess, publicized books that have the
Mhm.
nuanced representation.
Exactly. It's the books that aren't well known that have the characters that we need, but we need them to be popular so they can be a mainstream media type of a thing.
Exactly. So yeah, B2C by Clara Ward. I'll write that in the chat.
I'll have to put that on my list because that looks really fun.
So that's a fiction book. I've talked about a
Mhm.
number of nonfiction. There's a couple of others that um, Cody Diagle-Orians, aka Ace Dad Advice, talks about. Um,
Mhm.
Being Ace, an anthology of queer, trans, femme, and disabled stories of asexual love and connection. That looks like a great one. It was
Ooh, that sounds really
nominated
good.
for a 2024 Lambda Literary Award.
Oh, wow.
Um, that's what we need. We need the intersectional representation.
Mhm.
We need books like that. So
We do.
that's a good. That looks like a really interesting one. I want to read.
Mhm.
Um, Also, the Ace and Arrow relationship guide that recently came out
Ooh.
um, by Cody Diagle-Orians. For folks that know them on YouTube and TikTok, they're known as Ace Dad Advice.
Oh, okay. Yeah, you've mentioned them a few times.
And if you're thinking about more kind of YouTube representation,
Mhm.
Fluently A Spec is a great channel that came out recently. They are or he's a middle school teacher
Mhm.
who's Arrow Ace and has had some really interesting videos. Most recently, in the last couple days, came out with a video on a
Mhm.
topic that doesn't get anywhere near enough representation:
Mhm.
allosexual aromantics, and talking about just how much
Mm.
hate and misunderstanding that allo arrows have.
Yes.
And that is a topic I would like to explore in the future in this
Mhm.
podcast. But Fluently Aspec, obviously, Lynn Saga, um, many of you may know of them. They do some great content around asexuality and what it's like to be, non-binary as well. These are
Mhm.
some fantastic YouTubers. I don't know many people on Twitch that do this, unfortunately, which is why I kind of came.
Me
Yeah,
personally, I don't know. I know a lot of people who are asexual and will have like, during Pride Month, they'll have events
yeah,
and stuff like that, but not probably to that degree of talking that open about asexuality and stuff
yeah,
like that. So that means we need more guys. We need to
exactly.
plan something for Pride Month.
Absolutely. This is why I want to have this series of Pride Talks and talk to as many
Mhm.
people as I can. Welcome on in,
Exactly.
Princess Allie's Kingdom. How's it going,
Welcome
Allie? Good to
in.
see you. I'm going to be playing some Mario Kart a little bit later with Allie.
Oh,
I'll
very
give you a
nice. Hell
shout
yeah.
out.
Also, this is just me saying this as well too. There totally could be people on Twitch who are doing like stuff like that
Absolutely.
as well too. I just personally
Yeah,
don't know them.
I have
So,
not come across it. So if you
hey,
do
if
know of
you are,
folks,
let us
let us
know.
know. Absolutely.
Exactly. Twitch is a big space, so sometimes everything gets lost, you know?
Absolutely. I only know the communities I tend to hang out in.
Mhm.
Tends to be the Fruities folks, the folks from the
Mhm.
Ace and Arrow Raid Train, which was a big
Yep.
inspiration for this podcast because through that I
The Ace
was
and Arrow
able
Raid
to.
Train was so nice.
It was
Yeah.
amazing.
Shania did such a great job.
They did. They did. I can't wait for it to happen again.
Yeah, me too. I'm very thankful and blessed that we have those types of spaces now on Twitch as well too, where we can find more people who fall under the ACE umbrella and like the Twitch Pride Guild, for example, even in like the Twitch Women's Guild, you will also
Hmm.
find that as well. It's very nice and welcoming, and it makes me really happy.
Absolutely. Absolutely. It's great to see the chat in the guilds too on the around
Mhm.
asexuality and aromanticism.
Makes me feel seen. It makes me feel
Yeah,
appreciated.
and I'm glad somebody reached out to change the one channel to Ace and Arrow, which I was happy to see.
Oh, did they? That's even awesome. I
Yeah,
love that.
so that was great to see.
That's what we love to see.
Trying to think, we talked a lot about media representation
Mhm.
and the many aspects of asexuality that are misunderstood.
Yep.
Have we talked? We haven't explicitly talked about what allonormativity is. However, we've talked around it in many of the
Mhm.
problems that allonormativity creates. So,
Yeah.
allonormativity is the assumption that everyone is allosexual, i.e., that they
Mhm.
experience sexual attraction in a way that society typically deems as normal.
Yeah.
And therefore, there's a related assumption that everybody desires a sexual relationship.
Mhm.
That's not the case, obviously,
No.
but it causes a lot of problems for the aspec community, as
It
does
does.
amatonormativity. So, this was a term coined by
Mhm.
Elizabeth Brake in her book Minimizing Marriage, Marriage Morality, and the Law in 2011.
Mhm.
And this is the assumption that everybody desires a coupled romantic monogamous relationship.
Yep.
That's a mouthful, but that is
It is a mouthful,
amatonormativity
but
in a
yep.
nutshell.
Mhm.
And
Yeah, a
obviously,
lot of
for folks like myself, who
mhm.
is aromantic, I don't desire a coupled romantic monogamous relationship
Mhm.
in the sense that society sees a relationship.
Yeah. And it definitely obviously I personally am not aromantic, but I do have some friends who are aromantic. They get very much seen as like broken in a way, which is very upsetting to even like think about because it's like, "Oh, what do you mean you don't want the desire to, settle down in a coupled relationship? Is something wrong with you?" And it's like, "Nothing's wrong at all. I just don't want to have that." And that should just be totally acceptable and okay, and I don't understand why society, like, almost wants to pressure you
Mm,
into getting into those types of relationships when it's just like, why is it any of your business to begin with?
yeah. There's so many other kinds of relationships that are just as beautiful.
Exactly. Like, why can't we appreciate those types of relationships as well and celebrate those types of relationships as well than just simply a coupled relationship, a romantic relationship?
And it is unfortunately written into the law that unless the relationship is romantic in nature, it's
Mhm.
not seen as a valid relationship. And so it even comes
Yep.
down to, legal and tax implications.
Mhm.
So amount and normativity effects, and that's why Elizabeth Brake talks about it in the book Minimizing Marriage, Marriage Morality, and the Law, because there's
Mhm.
many legal and tax implications of, the relationship that
Yep.
aren't accepted as, or, these, queer platonic relationships or other equally
Mhm.
valid and just as important relationships
Mhm.
aren't seen as being important in society.
Yep. When they're just as important, if not more sometimes, than a romantic relationship.
Not every, no one person in your life can fulfill
Mhm.
all your needs, is going to understand
Exactly.
all aspects, or have the space, have the energy to provide everything for you.
Mhm.
That's why, you need those platonic relationships in life.
Exactly. And having just that one person do, like, everything for you is literally, like you said, impossible. That's why you need all your friends around you, your platonic relationships,
Mm-hmm.
so that you can grow and thrive as an individual.
Absolutely. And for me, what has brought me the most joy is
Mhm.
finding these communities here locally in Toronto, online,
Mhm.
where I've found this wonderful group of ace and arrow folks, and folks that understand that not all relationships have to be, you know, romantic.
Mhm.
And that's what brings me the most joy, creating spaces like this for folks to talk about it, to find spaces where folks with similar lived experiences can come together.
Exactly.
Absolutely. I've not found
Exactly.
a
Not just a
community, but
community,
family.
you found a family.
Absolutely.
Exactly.
Found family is just as important.
Oh, we love found family in this economy.
Exactly.
Sometimes it's better than your actual family, you know what? Hell yeah, we love that.
Yes, absolutely. So true. I do want to catch up and see what
Yeah, of
folks have been.
course.
Absolutely, Warrior for Life 9761. Of course.
Cute.
Um, yeah, marriage and romantic partnerships being seen as the most important is such a burden and leads to loneliness and feeling like you're a failure because you don't meet the expectations of society.
Mhm.
When why should society dictate what a relationship looks like to you? We had a really fantastic discussion around this in the previous episode around
Mhm.
relationship anarchy, around queer platonic relationships. Why should society dictate what a relationship looks like? Why not let the folks
Exactly.
in the relationship decide what a relationship looks like?
No, everybody has to be all up in your business and deciding things for you when it's like, I didn't invite you to this
No.
relationship. I didn't realize that my relationship with my partner also included all of you guys as well too. I thought it was just, between me and them type of a thing.
Ugh. But unfortunately, it's pervasive society.
It really is. And it's nobody's business but your own at the end of the day.
Exactly.
It's your choice at the end of the day. If you want to get married, you want to have kids, you want to be with somebody, you don't want to be with somebody. It's your choice.
Why should it
And
matter to them? Why should it
why should it
matter?
matter to you? It's not affecting you in any single
Yeah,
way. It's not
exactly.
gonna it's not bothering me at the end of the day that you don't want to be in a relationship. Like why should it matter?
So
You
true.
know? It's just so silly to think about when people are just so adamant about that and everything and like putting that pressure on you. It just really makes me think I'm like, why does it matter to you so much? And I know it has to do obviously with like how society was definitely like years ago and how everybody wanted to get, the perfect American dream with the white picket fence, had the kids and all that stuff, married to your partner, that luxury, joy. But we as a society have definitely moved on from that. Well, I say we as a society, but definitely parts of society have moved on from that. And we should just respect their decision at the end of the day. Why
Unfortunately,
why can't they
yeah,
just be happy? Just let them be happy.
it all unfortunately comes back to who's in power and
Yep.
who it benefits, who this
Yep.
societal structure benefits. The
Exactly.
white patriarchal male.
Yep.
That's what it comes down to in the end.
It
And
really does.
Sharonda J. Brown does an absolutely fantastic job at addressing this and breaking all this down
Mhm.
in their book, Refusing Compulsory Sexuality. And we
Mhm.
talked about what compulsory sexuality is, and it's essentially the consequences of allonormativity, that everybody desires a sexual relationship, therefore, sex has to be found in all aspects of society.
Yep. And it's like it doesn't have to be. Again, people just like to be so nosy and sticking themselves in everybody's business.
Mm-hmm.
When I could not care less what people outside of my bubble do because I'm not a part of the relationship, so I don't get to dictate what they say or what they do. It is not impacting me or hurting me in any way, shape, or form. And I wish so many people would just see that. If somebody wants to identify as something, let them identify as something. They want to, have a partner, have no partner, have multiple partners. Go let them do that. It does not impact me in any way, shape, or form. Just let everybody's business be their business.
Absolutely, Caber. Honestly, they gotta mind their own business.
Yep.
And if you're happy, that's all that
Th-
matters.
then I love that for you. I
Yeah.
love that you're happy.
Caber
I
was
feel like,
on the
mhm.
podcast earlier on. We had some great chats about many of these aspects around amatonormativity, aromanticism.
Yep.
Uh, yeah, we had some good chats. Let me shout
Hell
out
yeah.
Caber.
Let's go. We love good, healthy chats. Like this one here, we're having a very nice, healthy chat. Yippee.
So I think
Mhm.
talked a lot around. Is there anything else you want to add around, you know, allonormativity, amatonormativity, and how it's influenced, or how, I guess, how's it, I guess, how does your lived experience as an ace or arrow individual influence the relationships you've been in, and what have you learned from those relationships about your identity?
I feel like for me personally, because obviously I have been like a very like healthy relationship for like over 11 years, it is definitely a learning curve for real. Like I feel like I definitely put myself into situations where I came into the understanding of that you have to do these things because that's what society is kind of expecting from you. And it's me learning that I don't have to put myself in those situations and that the most important thing out of like being in any relationship or anything like that is very much communication with your partner, setting boundaries with your partner as well too, and finding how to be basically just comfortable with yourself, your sexuality, and how to also maintain that as well too with a partner who is not asexual. and, kind of, teach them about asexuality, have them learn about it as well too, and just kind of finding like a common ground basically with it basically, as I say basically 3 times in a row.
So true. So
Mhm.
true.
And
And
obviously every relationship is going to be
yeah,
different as well. Like the experiences that I have may entirely be different from your experiences as well to like anybody else who's asexual and has a partner as well too. Everybody's relationship is going to be different.
absolutely. There is no one way to have
Nope.
a relationship, nor should there be.
No, no, there be. And that's why we should just be comfortable with the relationships that people want to have and the decisions that they want to do with their relationship and not necessarily peer into it and tell them about the societal expectations and what they should do or should not do, should or should not do.
Absolutely. Couldn't have said it better myself. If you see someone living their life differently from you and you're upset by that, who's the biggest snowflake? That's such a valid point.
That's such a valid point.
It's not them.
Nope.
You might want to look in the mirror.
Yep, maybe we should just look in the mirror sometimes and be like, maybe I'm just very a negative person and maybe I should stop being a negative person. Like why am I getting mad about this type of stuff, you know?
Yeah.
Why does this matter to me? It shouldn't matter to me.
So we're coming to the last question here.
Mhm.
What does ace pride mean to you?
I personally feel like ace pride just means just being happy with yourself and just being happy just in general. Just being happy that, you have found this sexuality that you have acquainted yourself with and you're just happy to call yourself that basically and that you should be proud that you identify with this sexuality as well too and that you should know obviously that you're not a broken individual. You haven't made a mistake or anything like that. It's you. That's just who you are and that's okay if that's what's who you are because you're still a wonderful and beautiful person at the end of the day, no matter how you identify as, and fuck what society has to say about you. You're allowed to live your life how you want to live.
Beautiful.
Thank you.
Wholeheartedly
Thank
agree.
you. Yep. And we definitely need more asexuality in the media, please. So we
Absolutely.
can even be more proud about our asexuality and our aromanticism as well too.
There's
I,
somebody that brings
mhm,
a demi flag every year to one of the local pride festivals, and it brings me so
mhm.
much joy to see that. Because where else do you see demi flags?
Really.
Rarely ever see them, and
You rarely do ever see them.
seeing that brings me so much joy every year.
Yep, the excitement that I feel when obviously I talk about asexuality and somebody else will be like, "Oh yeah, I'm also asexual as well." And then you find out that they're demisexual and it's like, "Ah, you get me. You get me." It's like a secret little meetup almost in a way.
So myself, I don't identify as demi, but I'm somewhere under the
Mhm.
gray umbrella, so I
Yeah.
totally appreciate it, and I love
Yep.
seeing that representation for sure because we need
Exactly.
that diverse representation.
We do. We need to talk about all the umbrella terms under the asexual umbrella because there's so much and we all deserve to be seen.
And
Not just the one asexual person who is cisgender, who is white, who is, able-bodied. We need to
yeah,
see everybody.
absolutely. We
Mhm.
want to see the intersectional identities,
Yes.
the intersectional
Yes.
representation.
Yes.
That is so important.
That's what pride is. We wanna see all of it.
So is there anything else that we missed that you'd like to add before we close here?
Um, I do want to briefly touch about
Hmm.
one thing with a misconception because this reminded me about it because I had a friend who recently talked about it on Twitter and I forgot about this and it made me laugh really hard. I think going back to like another misconception about asexuality is the fact that obviously we don't dive into like anything sexual or anything like that, but I want you to picture if anybody reads fanfics or anything like that, especially like smutty fanfics. I hate to tell you, that those smutty fanfics are probably written by an asexual person. Like the most beautiful piece of smutty media you have read is probably made by an asexual person. I do not know why we write smut so well, but we really do. And it's very funny. Every time I've read like a smutty piece, I have found out the author is asexual, and I'm like, I don't know how we keep doing this, guys. It's just very funny to me.
As Mabes said in episode 3,
Hmm.
um, asexuals are some of the most twisted, demented, like sick fucks you'll ever come across.
We really are. And I think it's hilarious because I will see the most like grotesque monster on like the screen in like a Resident Evil game or something, and you'll just see me typing in chat multiple times, chat, hear me out, guys, wood, and everybody's like, glasses, what the fuck? And I'm like, hell yeah. It's so funny. It's such my favorite thing as well.
Yeah, some of the, many of the ace folks I know tell like the dirtiest jokes I know.
Yes, that too. We are not shy in regards to that.
I think
Do
just
not think that
because,
we are just
yeah,
shy in that. We will say it with our full chest and laugh
yeah,
about it afterwards.
that's the best part because
It
to
is.
us it's just a joke.
They don't expect it. Exactly. They don't expect us.
Yeah, exactly.
It's so funny. But yeah, that was the one thing I remembered that I needed to talk about as well too, just because it's just so silly. And I'm glad so many ace people also feel ace and arrow people feel that way as well too. And we have this like not an inside joke, but just so many experiences that we all have doing that to people.
I am definitely guilty of telling some um dirty jokes for sure.
Yep. I'm
Absolutely.
definitely guilty of writing some of the smuttiest smut you have ever seen back in the day. But that's why we need to have this representation in the media because I think it's hilarious.
Exactly. Exactly. Thank you so much for chatting with me today and
Of
chatting about
course.
Ace and Arrow Pride, chatting
I
about
had such a great
yeah,
time.
it's so much to talk about and getting,
Yeah.
even though we've talked about these issues
Mhm.
so many different episodes, every time we explore it from a new angle, I learn something
Exactly.
new, and there's just so
Yeah.
much to talk about.
And I learned something as well. And so it's a fun learning curve for everybody. And that's
Exactly.
life. It's all about learning and growing. And I love that for all of us.
And that's why it's important to have this intersectional lens because everybody's
Mhm.
going to come at it from a different angle and have more to add.
Exactly. And I love that. That's what
Exactly.
pride is learning and
Absolutely.
growing. Mhm.
Thank you so much again. So we are going to
Of
go on a raid
course.
here, I think.